It was a cold December night in New York City. The date, December 8th, 1980. Outside the Dakota apartment building, a small group of fans waited patiently for a glimpse of their idol, the man who once told the world to imagine all the people living life in peace. John Lennon, one of the most influential musicians of the 20th century, stepped out of a limousine with Yoko Ono by his side. They had just finished a long day at the recording studio, working on their next project, a symbol of their creative rebirth. As John walked toward the entrance of his home, one of those waiting fans, a man named Mark David Chapman, called out to him. Earlier that evening, Chapman had asked John to sign a copy of Double Fantasy. Lennon had smiled, autographed the album, and continued on with his day. But this time, Chapman didn't ask for another autograph. Instead, he pulled out a revolver and fired 5 shots. 4 of them struck John Lennon. Within minutes, one of the greatest voices of peace, art, and rebellion was silenced. As news spread across the world, millions wept, not just for the man, but for what he represented. John Lennon wasn't just a Beatle. He was a dreamer, a rebel, and a believer in love and change. And the story of his final days, the peace he found, the joy he rediscovered, and the tragedy that followed, is one of the most emotional chapters in music history. John Winston Lennon was born on October 9, 1940, in Liverpool, England, right in the middle of World War II. His father, Alfred Lennon, was a merchant seaman who spent long periods away at sea, while his mother, Julia, was a lively, free-spirited woman who encouraged John's love for music. But John's childhood was far from stable. His parents separated when he was just a boy. He spent most of his youth living with his aunt, Mimi Smith, who raised him with strict discipline and a sharp tongue. Still, it was Julia, his mother, who introduced him to rock and roll. She taught him how to play the banjo and later bought him his first guitar. Tragedy struck early in his life. When John was only 17, his mother Julia was killed in a car accident, struck by an off-duty policeman. The loss shattered him. He once said, "I lost her twice, once when I was taken away to live with my aunt, and once when she died." That pain would shape much of John's songwriting, from the loneliness in Help to the raw emotion in Mother. Behind the humor and wit that fans adored, there was a boy who had grown up learning that love could vanish in an instant. In the mid-1950s, rock and roll was sweeping across Britain, and young John Lennon was captivated. He formed a skiffle group called the Quarrymen, performing at small local gigs with schoolmates. One summer afternoon in 1957, a friend introduced him to a talented young guitarist named Paul McCartney. Paul impressed John with his ability to tune a guitar and remember lyrics. John, impressed but prideful, eventually invited Paul to join the band. That meeting would change music history forever. Soon after, George Harrison joined, followed by drummer Pete Best, and the Beatles were born. The early years were filled with endless performances, sleepless nights, and a hunger for success. In 1962, the final piece fell into place when Ringo Starr replaced Pete Best, and producer George Martin helped craft their signature sound. When Please Please Me was released in 1963, the Beatles became an overnight sensation. By 1964, Beatlemania had taken over the world. Crowds screamed their names wherever they went. Their performances on The Ed Sullivan Show in America marked the beginning of a global revolution, not just in music, but in culture. But even then, John Lennon stood apart. His lyrics were sharper, more reflective. He wasn't content with love songs. He wanted to explore meaning, truth, and the human condition. As the years went on, that desire for depth led him towards songs like In My Life, Strawberry Fields Forever, and A Day in the Life. poetic reflections of his mind and heart. By the late 1960s, John Lennon wasn't just a rock star. He was a voice for an entire generation. The Beatles had become more than a band. They were a movement. Their songs spoke of love, change, and the human experience in a way that no one else could match. Albums like Rubber Soul, Revolver, and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band changed everything about how music was made. They experimented with sound, with philosophy, with art. And at the center of it all was Lennon, the thinker, the dreamer, the one unafraid to question everything. It was John who wrote songs like All You Need Is Love, an anthem for the summer of love in 1967. It was John who said things that shocked the world, like, "The Beatles are more popular than Jesus now." That statement caused outrage, but it also revealed something deeper. Lennon was wrestling with fame, meaning, and identity. Behind the fame, he was searching for something: peace, truth, maybe even redemption. It was around this time that John met Yoko Ono, an avant-garde artist from Japan. Their meeting in 1966 marked the beginning of one of the most famous and misunderstood relationships in music history. Yoko wasn't just John's partner. She became his muse, his collaborator, and his mirror. Together, they began exploring art, politics, and spirituality. They recorded The Two Virgins, staged peace protests like their Bed-In for Peace, and released Give Peace a Chance, a song that became an anthem for the anti-war movement. But this new direction wasn't universally loved. Some fans blamed Yoko for changing John, or for the eventual breakup of the Beatles. Yet, the truth was more complex. By 1969, the Beatles were growing apart. Each member had different visions, creative ideas, and personal lives pulling them in separate directions. Lennon, restless and introspective, wanted freedom. Paul wanted structure. George wanted space. And Ringo wanted peace. The tension came to a head during the Let It Be sessions. What had once been brotherhood was now strained by creative clashes and exhaustion. In 1970, John officially announced his departure from the Beatles. It was the end of an era and the beginning of another. After the Beatles, Lennon embarked on a solo career that was raw, emotional, and deeply personal. His debut solo album, John Lennon, Plastic Ono Band, stripped away everything but truth. Songs like Working Class Hero and Mother revealed his inner pain, his trauma, his rebellion, his longing for love and identity. Gone were the catchy hooks of Beatlemania. In their place stood a man unafraid to show his scars. A year later, he released Imagine, the album that defined his solo legacy. The title track became his most iconic song, a hymn of hope and peace that transcended generations. Lennon once said, "It's not a statement, it's a dream." But even as his music inspired millions, his personal life grew more complicated. His outspoken activism drew criticism from governments and the media. He and Yoko became targets of surveillance by the FBI under the Nixon administration. John's message of peace and anti-establishment ideals had made him both loved and feared. Still, through it all, Lennon kept creating. Albums like Mind Games and Walls and Bridges reflected his ongoing evolution, from anger to acceptance, from protest to peace. Yet beneath that calm exterior, cracks were forming. Fame had isolated him. Substance use, emotional strain, and the constant media attention began to take their toll. In 1973, his marriage to Yoko Ono temporarily fell apart. They separated for nearly 18 months, a period John later called the Lost Weekend. During this time, Lennon lived in Los Angeles, working with friends like Harry Nilsson and Elton John. The parties were wild, The nights were long, and the man who once sang about peace was now trying to drown his pain in alcohol and chaos. But amidst the madness, there were moments of brilliance. He recorded Walls and Bridges in 1974, featuring the hit Whatever Gets You Through the Night, a song that symbolized his survival through darkness. Elton John, who had sung backing vocals on the track, made John promise to perform it live if it ever became a #1 hit. It did, and on November 28, 1974, John Lennon walked onto the stage at Madison Square Garden to fulfill that promise. It would be his last major concert appearance. After the show, John and Yoko reunited backstage. He later said it was one of the happiest nights of his life. In the years that followed, Lennon withdrew from the spotlight. He focused on being a father to his son Sean, born in 1975, and spent much of the late 70s living quietly in New York's Dakota building with Yoko. He called it his house husband period, a time of reflection, simplicity, and peace. He baked bread, took walks in Central Park, and rediscovered the joy of ordinary life. By 1980, John felt ready to return to music. He and Yoko released Double Fantasy, an album that celebrated love, rebirth, and partnership. Songs like Starting Over captured a man who had found harmony at last, with himself, his family, and his art. No one knew it would be his final album. By late 1980, John Lennon was finally at peace, or so it seemed. After 5 years away from the public eye, he was rejuvenated, filled with creative energy, and deeply in love with life again. He had returned to the studio. He was writing new songs, giving interviews, and talking about touring again, something he hadn't done since the early 1970s. In his last interviews, Lennon spoke with a sense of clarity that was rare, even for him. He said, "I still believe in love, in peace, in truth. I just don't believe in the myth anymore." It was the statement of a man who had lived through chaos and found balance. His new album, Double Fantasy, was a reflection of that peace, filled with songs like Woman, Watching the Wheels, and Beautiful Boy. Each one was a love letter to Yoko, to Sean, to the life he had built after so much pain. But fate, as it often does, had a cruel twist waiting. On December 6, 1980, John and Yoko were busy promoting Double Fantasy. They gave interviews, met fans, and spoke with journalists about the joy of being back. One of those interviews was with RKO Radio. When asked about how he saw the future, Lennon replied, "I just want to make good music, raise my son, and live in peace. That's it." It was an ordinary answer, but haunting in hindsight. 2 days later, December 8th, began like any other day. John and Yoko had a photo session with Annie Leibovitz for Rolling Stone magazine at their home in the Dakota, New York City. The photograph taken that day, John nude, curled around Yoko, became one of the most iconic images in history. It symbolized love, vulnerability, and connection. After the shoot, John signed autographs for a few fans waiting outside. Among them was a man named Mark David Chapman, someone Lennon had never met before. Chapman handed John a copy of Double Fantasy, which John signed with a smile. Then, Lennon turned to his driver and went to the studio, unaware of what would come next. That night, John and Yoko returned home around 10:50 p.m. after a long recording session at the record plant studio. As they stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance of the Dakota, Chapman was waiting. Without a word, he pulled out a revolver and fired 5 shots. 4 struck Lennon in the back and shoulder. John stumbled forward up the steps before collapsing. He was rushed to Roosevelt Hospital, but it was too late. At 11:15 p.m., John Lennon was pronounced dead. He was 40 years old. the news spread like wildfire across the world. Radio stations stopped their regular programming. People gathered outside the Dakota, lighting candles, holding signs, singing, "Imagine." Millions wept, not just for the man, but for what he represented. A voice of peace had been silenced. Yoko Ono was shattered. She asked that no funeral be held, saying John would have wanted people to celebrate his life, not mourn his death. Instead, fans around the world held vigils. In New York, more than 100,000 people gathered in Central Park to stand in silence for 10 minutes in his memory. The world didn't just lose a musician, it lost a dreamer. John Lennon wasn't perfect. He had flaws, anger, contradictions, but his message, love, peace, truth, outlived him. Paul McCartney later said, "I can't believe it. It's just too much." George Harrison quietly said, "He'll be missed by the whole world." And Ringo Starr flew to New York immediately to comfort Yoko and Sean. It's easy to talk about John Lennon, the icon, the Beatle, the activist, the visionary. But behind all that was a man who struggled deeply with identity. He once said, "Part of me suspects I'm a loser, and the other part of me thinks I'm God Almighty." That duality, confidence and insecurity, defined his art. He was constantly evolving, challenging himself and the world to look deeper. In his final years, Lennon had finally reached a sense of peace. He had rediscovered love, fatherhood, and purpose. He had found, in his own words, the simpler life, and that makes his ending all the more heartbreaking. Today, more than 4 decades later, John Lennon's influence still echoes through time. From Imagine to Instant Karma, from Strawberry Fields Forever to Give Peace a Chance. His songs remain anthems of hope. The Strawberry Fields Memorial in Central Park stands as a quiet reminder of his dream, a vision of peace and unity that still inspires millions. Artists across generations cite him as an influence. U2, Oasis, Coldplay, Billie Eilish. They've all drawn from his honesty and his courage to speak truth through music. But perhaps his greatest legacy isn't in his fame or his records sold. It's in his message. He once said, "You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one." And that single line became a prayer for humanity. John Lennon's story is one of brilliance and tragedy. A boy from Liverpool who dreamed of more. A man who changed the world with words and melody. And a soul who reminded us that even in a world of chaos, love, and peace still matter. Though his life ended far too soon, his voice never truly faded. Because as long as people keep singing his songs, John Lennon lives on.